Welcome back. Um, and yeah, today we will talk about how to prepare your teams for effective data management. And of course, data management plans are part of the game. I want to say thank you to Anna Soldanova, data steward of natural sciences in Library of Czech Academy of Sciences. She helped me with the presentation. And today, for the purposes of the seminar, as it was mentioned already, it's for supervisors, principal investigators, managers in general, for people who are dealing and have to organize teams in order to gain outputs for data. And I will be using probably the word manager for everyone, so it will be easier for me to go through. So if you hear manager, it means all of you probably. So yes. We will start with it was mentioned, I think, already. So there will be two breaks of 5 minutes. The times are approximate, and by the end, we'll have Q&A. So keep your questions for the end. And we will start with some introduction. So first of all, I will start with the basics of open science. What is open science? It's a measure to have science literally open and research to other scientists, but also to the general public. And it's a method to basically understand research and to have transparent research, so we know that it is actually properly done and it's effective. But it's also a way to create works that are relevant in the future and that can actually be used in the future from other researchers or people. So the point of open science is basically to make work that it's useful all around, not just today, but also for the years to come. What do we mean when we talk about open science in research? We mean about specifically transparent methodology and documentation. So we're talking about open methodologies that are able to be read and understood, and also management practices for internal purposes and archiving purposes. We're talking about appropriate formats, not just for data, but for all different types of outputs or softwares, for example. Also for stuff that you are using, not just for things that you are creating. And we're talking about appropriate formats in order for these outputs and data, for example, to be used, to be able to be used in the future. So this is a very important guideline for you, for example. Another thing that has come lately also to the stage is that we need to be careful when we're using other people's work, and it's important that you're using appropriately the works, either by citing or by using it based on the license. But also what we have started lately is licensing works that we create in order for others to know how to use them properly. Now, more to data management. Data management sounds a lot like a hectic thing sometimes, especially when it comes with the word plan in the end, because it's a requirement sometimes to have this data management plan. What I want to say is that data management is basically something you do every day, even without realizing it. It's basically when you are labeling your work, or when you are dating your samples, when you're adding your name to the samples, when you're just simply making a folder on your computer with family photos and things like that. Data management is not extra complicated. Sometimes it gets very complicated, but it is not as scary as it might sound because we gave it a name. So it's better to think of it as something that you do every day already. What do we mean in research? Data management starts and always should start with understanding what data you're working with, what data you're creating, what data you are using. It's a lot of times that people don't understand what part of the work is data. So, as managers, you really need to be able to identify the data of your team and to be able to make it clear if it's needed from you. Also, what data management involves is after you have recognized your data, is to make a plan about how you're going to manage those data. And this is just about organization. It's not about fulfilling data management plan. It's literally about making sure that your team will actually have a guideline on how to deal with data. And for example, the data will not be lost in several computers, and then the people finish their work, and then you don't know how to finish a paper or to continue your work because the data are lost. So when we're talking how you would manage the data, we mean about what names the data will have. It's very important, and I will go into it in depth later. Dating your data, or also choosing if you will keep all the data, if you will publish data, will you publish, if you will publish raw data, for example, or analyze data. And a very big part of data management comes with a cost. It is basically part of the costs for your project to deal with data management, because you need to think how, for example, the people who are producing or curating the data are paid, or what equipment you need to maybe buy or rent for this analysis. And also, if you will hire, for example, a data steward to help you with data management planning and open science for your project. So, as I already mentioned, the data management plans are not just a funder requirement, they are really important for teams, and they are a way to organize your team so you will actually have an effective project. So DMPs, it's the abbreviation of data management plans. DMPs are basically living documents. You will hear it everywhere, you will read it everywhere. And it is for you and your team firstly, and then it is a requirement. If you have already a data management plan organization within your team, then you will see that the funder requirement becomes just a simple review of what you also only have, which I will go more in depth later. Data management plans, as it's expected, should basically contain all management processes related to data, from reusing to creating, analyzing, archiving, storing data. And it's really useful for managers to have one for their team, because really it can save you time and resources in the end, but also not in this project, but maybe also in the future projects. I will give you a scenario, so we'll see how data management plan could be useful in real life. So here we have a funded project running for 5 years. You have several master and bachelor students, 5 PhDs, and 1 postdoc working in your team. You are the PI, and you are responsible for reporting the outputs. On the 3rd year of the project, several of the students finish. The postdoc also finds another job, and the PhD students, 2 of the PhD students are leaving too. So here you are probably freaking out a little bit, and this is not even a rare scenario. This is very common, I would say, in projects that are working in universities, that people leave either because they find another interesting path for them, or for any other reason. And here you have to think how you're going to deal with this scenario. Your next steps should firstly be to hire new students, probably, or to anyway integrate them in your team. Possibly PhDs are needed because they are also helpful to manage earlier career researchers. And probably you need a postdoc again because they really help with the workload of a project. So the questions that I have here are very simple, and usually the answer is really not. So how do you explain your project to the new people without losing information? Because if you're having just a conversation with a new student, the most possible scenario is that they will be lost and they will forget some of the information you are giving them. New people, when they get, let's say, integrated into a project, they do need some documentation. They need some information from the project. And also the best scenario is that you give them also some previous done work in the project so they understand more about it. How do you explain the data that they need to work with that were already created by previous people? Because if they come in the middle of the project, it's possible that they need to work with data that were created and they need to continue this creation or analyze the previously created data. So in this scenario, let's say that the person who created the data is not willing to meet with the new people. So there you have a very big problem, right? You have a problem because you as the manager don't have the time to know the individual processes by heart. You cannot teach the new person how they will deal with the data, and you cannot find the person who was already working with the data. If you don't have proper documentation from the previous people, then it's very difficult for you to properly give the information to the new people in order for your project to actually be effective and to finish. And last but not least, and this is my favorite because it happens all the time, especially in laboratory, how can you make sure as a manager that you need to give work to the new people that a sample that is called GDL YAN1, it's the last sample instead of GDL1 YAN. This is about naming conventions, and it's very important, and it is a big part of the data management plan. And we can forget the word plan if you want. We can talk about data management simply. And it's really important that you understand what the naming conventions are when you're working with specific data. What happens when you have data management for the whole team? An organized plan gives you the opportunity to understand what the data that were left by someone are and what the names of the data mean, why this YAN1 has the number in the end and why the other one does not have it in the end. So these differences are very small and they do happen very often, not just in laboratory samples, but also in the computer. It can be very similar problem, and it's one way to save yourself by having really planned data management. So how do we save time and resources through data management plans? An internal data management plan means that you and the team have co-created a plan that you agree that this will be how we will be handling data, and it will be part of the project. It will be growing with the project. Basically, the DMP is able to give the new hires all the important information about the data they will be working with, but also information in general about the project so they can understand better what their colleagues are working with in case they need, for example, to collaborate with someone. And they don't need to be all your team does not need to be available at the same time when you hire new people in order for you to explain to the new researchers how to do what they need to do. And this is quite a problem sometimes in big teams that we don't have the time to meet all together because of personal work of researchers are doing their experiments. They don't have the time to meet all together at the same time sometimes. So it's important that you have some documentation, that it will be simply given to the new hires. And of course, they can come back with questions, but it's much easier if you have all the information organized in a document for them, and then they can pinpoint what they don't understand. Now, if you do that, all your researchers, before the new hires were coming and after, will have the same information. They will be working on the same principle on how to deal with their data, how to name their data, how to store their data. And anytime they don't know what something is, what a folder is, or what a specific data set means, they can go to the data management plan of your team, and then they can find out. And then you don't need to wait for someone who has left the team some years ago to explain to you how this information is useful or how can it be used. I want to stretch that the data management plan is a living document and that updates are essential. If you have an internal data management plan, you really need to keep up with it. So as the project evolves, you need to really spend the time to put the information inside the plan. It's also very common that researchers themselves sometimes forget some information about their data. For example, where did they store some data, or why did they name them the same way as their previous data set? So this information, if it keeps being updated in the data management plan, it will save you a lot of issues and problems when it comes to your data. And when it is time to actually fulfill a requirement, like a funder who is asking for a data management plan, you don't need to go through everything with everyone. You don't need to run around and look for the researcher who did a specific experiment to make sure that you have it in the data management plan. You can simply review what you have, modified to the needs of the funder. So you give them the information they need. You don't need to give extra, for example, but you already have a prepared information. And then the last minute data management plan will actually be more realistic, first of all, and then it will just be an update. It will not be trying to figure out what my team is doing in the 6-month period. So of course, it sounds a lot, and I would like to tell you how to not freak out when you have to deal with all this. And you might be wondering if it's also your job to deal with all this. It really depends. It depends if you will have, for example, a project data steward, or if you have decided to deal with data management and open science yourself. Then the workload is to the specific person. I will show you how you can divide and conquer this work. It's important to remember to start preparing your data management organization scheme in the beginning of your project. Ideally, when you're still thinking about the project, so when you are still creating the idea, and not later. But this is very rare case. So I would say that when you are writing the proposal, you should basically try to connect the points of the proposal that are related to data with what the data management will be for the specific parts. And because a lot of people find this time consuming and they don't do it at the time, first of all, I will tell you that if you do it when you're writing the proposal, it's much clearer to you. And when the time comes, you don't have to run around and look for answers. And it also makes clear how the project will be working for the whole team. But if you are not willing to do it while writing the proposal, you can start doing it immediately after the acceptance of the grant. And I cannot stress this enough, but please don't do it last minute. Like data management planning takes long time. It takes not so long time if you are like 3 people, which is not usually the case. And still, maybe you will be creating too many data, so you might not even have the time also in that scenario. It's very important that you understand that organizing your work contains the data management, and the data management is part of your projects. So, what to consider as a manager? What are the steps you need to do when it comes to data management organization? First of all, you really need to get to know your open science requirements. As the manager of the team, you should know what the project should deliver, right? You probably are very well aware of the outputs you need in terms of publications. But what is very common lately is that a lot of your publications need to be open access. You need to understand the funders' requirements about open science. OS here means open science. You need to understand what they are talking about when they talk about data management. What does it mean to deposit your data in repositories? And you really need to read through this. You don't need to skim it. You need to understand it because it can cause you issues if you have not paid attention. For example, if you're required to publish open access one specific number of publications, and then you don't understand this, so everyone is publishing in closed journals, it might cause you the issue that you don't fulfill the requirements of your funding. Another thing that the manager should do, and it doesn't matter if you are not the team's manager forever, if you're just the PI for the project, but what you should do is like to spend some time with the team, get to really know the people, and it's good to have also some emotional intelligence, not just to know their names and basically to know that they are working with you, but it's good for you to know them a little bit better, but also to understand who is working with what. So in terms of work relationship, to be able to communicate with them easily when you need some specific information about specific parts of the project, to know who is the person who is connected to that part of the project. And this way, you get to know your data, which is also very important because when you are able to talk with your team closely, they can give you the information about the data that they are working with, and it can be clear and sufficient. And basically, when you are approachable and when you are open to your team for questions and answers, you are being an informed manager. An informed manager is always a happy manager. And this is my advice to you. And after that, we have what you have to do and for your own knowledge, basically, and then how to put this in a team meeting, how to bring this in team terms. So since you know now your open science requirements for the project, in the beginning of the project, and don't forget about it. You need to inform your team. You need to give them all the information about how they should handle their data, what is expected of them if they are expected to put the data in a repository, for example, under some open license, if they are expected to publish open access or not. You really need to give them this information. And this needs to happen the moment they are hired for the project. You cannot wait for them to need to publish something for them to know the requirements, because the way we're working with data changes, and they need to be aware from the beginning that the more organized they are, the easier it will be for them to fulfill the requirements. A second part is that you actually need to be the middle point and give them also information about possible help in your institute or university. For example, if there is an institutional or project data steward, if there is an open science office or another center that is working closely with the projects that are related to the university, you need to give them this information. And you might think like, but this is not something I should do because they can look online. Sure, they can look online. The thing is that a lot of times you might be hiring people who come from different places, from a new laboratory, from another laboratory, from another country. And you might think that they might be able to find all the necessary information, but this is not the case. And you should be the person who gives them this information, because also it affects your team's efficiency. So when the team has the information, then they are working better. And last point here is to give them the DMP with the information that you need their data to have. So in this small example, I will deal with DMPs a little bit more in depth in a while. But for example, if you hire some people in the beginning, and you have created already with the data steward a draft data management plan, you need to discuss it with the team. And for example, they can also give you their opinion. If, for example, you're requiring some information for microscopy data that they cannot give you, they can tell you already that, I'm sorry, but this does not make sense for this specific data set, in case you were not aware. So I cannot provide you that, but I can provide you the following. So it's very important that they are from the beginning aware what is the plan for data management. And just like the manager, an informed team and a happy team is an effective team. So we will dip a little bit deeper to the DMP timeline. And here we have the stages that need to be worked on with the DMP. This is, of course, advice. You don't have to do all the steps. You can change them based on what you think it's important for your project, based on the length of the time of your project. So think about what I will say, and you can change it based on what are your real needs. As we discussed before submitting the proposal is the best part to have already created a draft data management plan. So you have written your proposal, you have figured out how this data that you will produce will be handled or you wish to be handled. And you prepare this draft data management plan. You submit the proposal. It's not yet time to submit the data management plan. Your project starts, and with the team together, because now you are a communicative manager and you're open with discussion, you figure out that some parts of the draft data management plan don't make sense. Some things need to change. Some things need to be better or need to be removed. So you create basically the first data management plan that will be actually submitted for the project. Then after you submit the first data management plan for the project, there is a big gap usually for long projects where you can work on your project and then you need to send an updated data management plan usually in the middle of the project. This is, I would say, quite late for your team, not for the funding part. For reporting it is fine. For your team, it's quite late to update the data management plan in the middle of the project because a lot of information changes and a lot of times we forget what changes. So when you go to the first data management plan, you suddenly realize that, oh, I forgot to deal with this. I thought I would name my data this way. I named them completely different. What would be better would be for you to have specific time frames where you would meet and update the data management plan the data management plan should be anyway available to the whole team for the whole project, so they can update it themselves when they have some update to give. So before the reporting period, you have already updated your data management plan. You do a final review and then you send it. So you don't need to find the people on the last minute again. And this happens as many times as you need during the project. And then before the last reporting period, you have the same thing. You have updated your plan usually in the curve of the project towards the end. And there is quite a lot of information to be given because towards the end, there is a lot of outputs, the new outputs, and a lot of people have much bigger data management plans by the end. Or even in the middle, but in the end, they have also more structured information because in the middle, you might still not know what are the persistent identifiers, for example, for the data if you have not published them yet. So before the last reporting period, you have a general overview of what has been done, and then you submit this one. After you finish the project, you might think that data management planning is done. It is somehow, and somehow it's not. But if you keep this time frame reporting of the data management plan and the team keeps up with this, everyone is happy and they think you are a great boss. And I will show you how it's important to have the data management plan after the project. So after the project, you have basically all the documentation you need for data handling, because finishing a project doesn't mean that, for example, you don't have a team to deal with anymore, or that you don't want to continue your research in the same part, but continuing on the data that you have already published, for example, or continue creating data on a similar manner. So in this way, when you finish, you have the DMP, you have a detailed overview of what data was created, where they are, how are they stored, how can you reuse them, what data you have, what data types. And it's a very simple way to go through the data management plan and create new plans. So, I mean, new projects. So reading the data management plan can give you also an idea of how you could continue your research, because you see an overview of the project and you understand very well how the data was handled. And for the team, it's an easy access to read the data management plan and find out themselves, for example, some data that they have worked with, where they are, if they don't remember where they stored them, or what exactly did they do, or how a colleague worked with a specific part of the data. So they don't need to guess who was doing what part of the project. They can find it in the data management plan. And it basically helps with the continuation of work. So they can also be inspired by the data management plan. But it's also when it's time for them to publish something that is based on the data created from the project, for example, a thesis that was part of the project, they can easily find the information for their data, and they don't need to find out 2 years of work in the last 2 months if they have not had them organized, for example. So here I have gathered just 4 of used tools for data management planning. You can check them out if you don't know them yet. Data Stewardship Wizard is quite known in Czech Republic. It is in general free. Usually institutions have their own instance and you can log in through some institutional email. And it basically is a question and answer environment. You can also have comments, so you can talk with your teammates, and it's updated in a live manner. The Fair Wizard, it's basically based on the Data Stewardship Wizard. It can be commercial, so if you are individual, you can still use it for free. But if you need to buy services for a bigger team, you can buy it, and you have also support from the team who is working with it. And then there is Argos and DMP Online, who are also possible to be worked for free for individual researchers. And you can choose from a catalog of different data management plan templates, let's say, based on different funders, and also from templates that the teams themselves have created. The National Repository Platform, NRP, has now created an instance for the Data Stewardship Wizard, and it has some new functionalities. It has developed tools and functions, especially for the needs for the National Repository Platform. And it has a knowledge model. Knowledge model is basically what you see afterwards as the user interface. So the question and answer, let's say. So when I talk about knowledge model, that's what I mean. So the knowledge model fulfills criteria from common projects here in the Czech Republic, for example, like Mishamu2 or Gatzer or Horizon Europe. It's still in pilot mode, but it's available to everyone within the infrastructure, and you can see how it looks like. This is the webpage. It's also in English, and you can click Start Planning, and you will receive this page where you can basically log in if you already have an account, or create an account here. And this is the first interface you see. You can create a project, and you also have the guide of the Data Stewardship Wizard on the site, and the EOSCZ website if you need more information. So we'll talk a little bit about funding and open science. What are common requirements from funders? Very, very often we see, and more, we see publications that need to be open access under an open license. As mentioned before, you probably need to submit data management plan in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end of the project, which will contain information about your plan. And this plan needs to be updated properly, and also it needs to contain information why you didn't do some of the parts that you planned to do, for example. Another requirement is submissions of data sets in a repository, but also information about ethics can be mentioned in the data management plan. So how are you planning to deal with sensitive data, for example, or personal data? Another thing that we have is common requirements for open science from journals, which are not the same as it comes from funders. So here we have the journals a lot of times require that you publish your data in a data repository and connect them with a persistent identifier like a DOI inside the publication. But there is also the possibility that the journals require that the data and the preprint from the publication are published in a repository that is connected to the journal, so not that you can publish in any repository. And this is part of the guide for authors usually, so you can find that information there. Of course, if the journal repository is a trusted repository, then it usually fulfills the requirement also for the funder, because usually the funder requires you to have a trusted repository, not just any repository. Another thing from journals is data availability statement. The data availability statement should basically state where your data are and how can someone access them. A lot of times people prefer to write that the data will be available after contact with the author. And there are times where this is actually important because, for example, you might have sensitive data and you might need to do some verification of the identity of the people that need to access the data. But in general, the data availability statement is there to help also you, not only for the people who want to reuse your data, but also it can increase your citations, for example. If you have properly arranged your data in a repository and they have received a persistent identifier, then through the connection of the data DOI and the publication DOI, you receive your citations. And citations are not the let's say the end game of research, but of course it's important. And this is something you should consider when you're writing your data availability statements. Also, another problem that comes when you write that you will give the data only when they contact you is that basically you don't have the opportunity to answer to all the emails. Some of them might be lost in spam. And also, a lot of times people use some institutional email, so it's not possible for them to answer questions about the data after they have finished their work in a specific institution. So think very well about your data availability statements, I would say. It's really good for you, but it's also good for the general research, for having research transparent and having the possibility to reuse the data you have created, because we're doing research in order to create something for this life. So the data availability is important. And one of the other things I wanted to mention, so you probably know it, is the contributor roles taxonomy, or otherwise credit, that you can find that it's required from a lot of journals. And basically, you can write there which author did what in the publication. And also there you can include information about data processing, data collection, and data analysis, for example. Common mistakes and questions about generally data management. Data formats for long-term archiving are very tricky sometimes. People don't know sometimes that the data formats they're using are not for long-term archiving, because it might be some data format that it's very common to be used and everyone is working with it. So I have added in another slide a list for you to go through if you wish to see what data formats are for long-term archiving. And why is that important? It is because when we are saving our data in a repository, it fulfills a requirement, yes, but also we do it for the future of research. So if we use a data format that in a few years might not be possible to be opened by the softwares we're using, by the software we're using, or for example, if it's proprietary, so it is connected to a specific software that you need to buy, it might reduce the reusability of our data. Another part is licensing of publications that sometimes gets people confused. So, for example, first of all, as managers, you need to read a bit about licensing of publications and what are the different licenses that exist. And also to be aware what your funder is requiring of you, and if the journal you are planning to publish actually fulfills that requirement. So you need to pay attention. For example, if you see CC BY, Creative Commons Attribution License, International License, you might not recognize the different Creative Commons licenses. And if it starts with CC BY, you might believe that all of the licenses are the same. So it's good for you to go through the licenses that the journal is offering. You don't need to read all the licenses that exist, and make sure that it has the same availability that the funder is requiring of you. So basically the same openness. Another thing that I want to talk about is persistent identifiers for data and publications. So publications receive their DOI usually, or any other persistent identifier that you might give it. And there are a lot of supplementary information, sometimes also data. What is important here is that when you are planning to publish your data in a repository and it's connected to the publication, what's better is to basically keep separate records for the publication and the data. So when you are citing the publication, so when you're talking about the publication, you can properly cite the specific persistent identifier. And when it comes to the data, you can talk specifically about the persistent identifier of the data. So the person who is reading your work can understand what data you're talking about without being lost in the publication for what data you're talking about, because they have the same persistent identifier. And also the same goes for data for a specific publication. In most scenarios, data sets are better to be uploaded in separate records and still connect to the publication through the DOI. So for example, if you do a publication and the data availability statement can contain the DOIs of the different data that you have already in a repository, and the other way around. Repositories usually give you the opportunity to connect or write somewhere the persistent identifier of the publication that is related to the data. And also a lot of repositories give you the opportunity to explain what the relationship is. So if the data is part of the publication, or if the publication is generated based on the data, or what other relationship they might have. And then data repository and software repository, I want just to explain that when we're talking about software repository, for example, in an application, we have their repository for the code and we're using it. A lot of times people think this is sufficient for example, for funder requirements. This is not really what we mean when we talk about repository for data. For data, you should receive a DOI, and even for your software, the best for you is to connect what you have already in the software repository with a data repository or publications repository that will give you a persistent identifier. For example, Zenodo and GitHub have an interconnection. So from Zenodo, you can receive the persistent identifier, while in GitHub, you can be working with your open source software, for example. Here, you will receive this presentation later if you want on the webpage of EOSC, and you will find these 4 different web pages for data formats for long-term archiving, and you can go through them. There are more if you want to find. I chose the ones that I'm using, and you can take a look here to make sure that the data your team is working with is also related to long-term archiving, because it is a part of requirements also from funders to have the data in a repository, but that they can be reused. So it's part of fair data, let's say. Right? You must be able to see it. So we'll continue with a few more questions, and then I will move to a little more practical part. Common questions that exist about data. Several teams work with large data sets, and this is actually very tricky still, because several repositories don't have the opportunity to upload immense amounts of data, and also sometimes they offer the opportunity for you to buy, for example, some space, which is not ideal always when we are working with a lot of data because you are not made of money, basically. So some part that you can try to work with large data sets is to try to basically minimize them. So to remove any data that are not useful or that were not used in a specific part of the project. As I said, find repositories that you might be able to pay or that they accept larger amounts of data. There are some repositories, but still it might not be enough for you. Some people separate their data sets. I don't find this ideal because basically you have more than one persistent identifier. So for me, another solution is to average your data. So if you really have very large data sets, sorry, just a second. Yeah. So if you have large data sets, you can maybe try to average them and explain how in the metadata how this averaging happened. Also not ideal because with uploading data in a repository, you try to make them as transparent as possible, and averaging them already loses some information. But large data sets are tricky, so I cannot really give you one answer. It really depends on the project. Who owns my data? So as data managers, you need to make clear to your team who owns the data that are created in the project, who is the responsible person for basically deciding if the data can be uploaded in a repository, what license they can be under, if they will go into a patent or what. And you need to inform this to your team. All the people in your team should know this. This can exist in the data management plan as a simple sentence that explains what the data. Sorry? Okay. That explains. Yeah. So, who owns the data? It's very important to be clear to all the members of the team. And also you as the as the manager of the team should know who owns the data and try to make it clear with your university, but also with industrial collaborators. For example, if you're working with industry, you might need to inform them about how you deal with your data or what data will be published. And it's very important that you make it clear with the collaborators who has the final say, who is the owner, the rights holder, etc. Another common question about data is some researchers are not aware if they are working with sensitive data, and that comes with the fact that sometimes sensitive data are considered to be only personal data, so GDPR related. I would say that this is not the case. Sensitive data can be any data that is, for example, under NDA, that is under some contract, and it could cause some harm if the information it's out. So when you are not sure if you're working with sensitive data, it's good to discuss it with either a data steward of your institute or project. And in general, all your teams should have the same idea if they're working with sensitive data. It comes to the mind that sometimes some people consider some data sensitive and some not. And it is not really so personal. So you can clarify for the whole team if they are or not working with sensitive data. And the last question is, what is metadata? I will go through it now in the next slides. But in general, if your team does not have clear idea what metadata are, you can contact your data steward, which can help you understand your team's metadata, but also in general the concepts. The common questions about metadata are, first of all, what it is, how to create metadata for a specific project, what parts you need to include in the metadata, and how does it look like. I hope the next slides will help you answer these questions, and we will try to discuss it also later in the Q&A if you wish. So here I have a picture that I found in Wikipedia Commons in public domain. And it is a recipe, basically, a very old recipe. And the recipe on the top shows that you can roast or dry fry some parts of the recipe, blah, blah, blah. And then here we have cauliflower, cucumber, flowers, gilliflowers. These are the ingredients. The ingredients themselves are metadata because they give us the information of what we need to use in order to reproduce this recipe. And the information here is basically a description of the process. So we will know step by step what to do to reproduce the same food. So this is an example of metadata, basically. And it's very simple and you see it every day, not this specific one, in general in recipes. Now, examples of metadata in research usually involve names of authors, collectors of data, right holders, a contact person that is responsible for dealing with the data, managing the data, and sharing them, a short abstract of the data. And I don't mean for the publication, because if you are thinking like an abstract that you give for the publication that is connected to the data, I don't mean that. I mean a description of what these data are related to. Then you can add the DOI of the publication, for example, and what is their purpose. Also, it's very important to not forget to write the naming conventions you used inside your data. So when someone opens the data, they can immediately understand just by looking at the names what they are reading. And the very important part is the methodology. It doesn't fit everyone. Methodology is not used in the same extent in all disciplines, but in general, methodology is an important part of metadata. So, for example, in the publication, you might have some methodology about how some experiments happened, but you don't explain usually exactly how you analyzed your data. So, for example, if you upload analyzed and raw data, the person who is reading this analysis needs to be able to understand how you moved from the raw data to the analyzed data in a step-by-step explanation. This is the best way to do it, but of course, there are differences in disciplines, and it really goes project by project, so case by case. And also the metadata contain terms of use, for example, licenses, so how the people can use the data that are related to the metadata. I will start now with an example. I found this data set in Harvard Dataverse, and the name of the data set is fluorescent polarization for figure 7. So here I'm giving you only a small part of the data, and it is one of the sheets that exists in the data table. So as a researcher, I would start by looking at the data and try to understand what I'm looking at. Since I have worked in a laboratory, the first two columns to me seem that they are working concentration, for example, and final concentration. Another thing that I noticed is that there is this abbreviation, SH2, which unfortunately can mean two different things, at least. Two examples are here, the explanation in medicine and chemistry. So you can see that already I need some metadata that will explain to me which abbreviation we're talking about. Again, from the name of the dataset, I'm not sure if this is about medicine or chemistry or what is it about. We have to read the metadata for this. Another thing that I notice is the naming conventions. And you will see that the naming of the sheets on the bottom here start with something that looks like date. This is a very common way for data management to write dates, but I still need to confirm that this is indeed 2019 fifth month and 10th date, because it might be some person, for example, from that they put first some other, like the day first and then the month, I don't know. So we need to confirm this in the metadata, the naming convention. And then I see this pink part, which is some specific coding of the name for the people who know the data to understand. And for us to be able to use this data, we need to be able to understand what this data means, what this name means. In my dataset, I already find two places that this pink colored naming exists, but I notice also that they have another number in between them. So the name is almost the same, but it contains the number 3 in between them. So this exists in two cells in my data. So I need to understand, first of all, why it exists in two cells and what are the differences between the cells. So as a researcher, I would go to the metadata now and try to find these answers. First of all, I try to find, as I said, the link. First of all, I highlight the things that I find most important for me to see. This is part of the metadata, it's not all the metadata, so it's just for the example, yeah? So first of all, I need to find document description, data files description. They are here, so if I click on it, they will take me to the right place. Fluorescent polarization data for figure 7 is the title, as we said in the beginning. The identification number leads me back to the same data set. And then there are keywords, medicine, health, and life sciences, which solves a bit the issue about the abbreviation, because I know we're talking about medicine now. So probably SH2 is about the protein structure. And then the abstract informs me that these are raw fluorescent polarization data. Then the methodology, processing, and data access are empty. So I don't have information on that. But on the notes, I have the information that this is public domain dataset, so you can use it freely. Later on, I see also that there are a number of cases, 35, and variables per record. I can find what type of file this is, tab-separated values, and also I have some information here for the variables on the right side. What comes to my mind when I see this metadata? I basically try to find out what this figure 7 is, because I understand this is fluorescent polarization data for figure 7, but unfortunately in the metadata, I don't find any DOI that connects me to a figure. So this is a confusing part. For example, I cannot understand what this figure, how this figure is connected to the data, and what exact part of the data is this figure showing, and where is this figure found? Is it in an article, for example, or in an internal database? I am not aware. And since I do not find a DOI or other persistent identifier that leads me there, I cannot answer these questions. Another part of the data of the same data set in another sheet is that we have these two charts. These charts are named chart 1 and chart 2, if I'm not mistaken. They don't have more explicit naming. And you will see that their title is exactly the same as the cells we were looking before. But the bottom one, it says adjusted. Now, as a researcher, I understand that this dataset indeed looks adjusted, so it looks like it has been moved, but I don't have the information how this adjustment happened. So what I need to find in the metadata is the differences between these two figures. How has this second figure been adjusted to the first, and what was the reasoning behind it? But also which one is supposed to be figure 7. Is any of them supposed to be figure 7? Are they both in figure 7? I still don't have this answer. So here, another part of the data is this working concentration that I still assume because I don't have the explanation of the abbreviation, but it is in some submolar units. So I'm guessing because I have been working in a lab, for example. So we have here working concentration, and we find some link in the variables that give us that this is summary statistics with a standard deviation, the maximum, the minimum, and a mean value. This is a good link. It's some part that we can use. We understand that this is a numeric value. But here we'll summarize basically what was missing from this data and metadata information that I showed you. Again, this was just part of the data and metadata, so I can give you the example. So what was missing is a description of what is figure 7, the title of figure 7, because we know that these are fluorescent polarization data, but we don't know if this is also the name of figure 7. We're missing any persistent identifier like a DOI for an article or a preprint or any other persistent identifier that connects this data set to any other work. We needed some explanation of what work was done in the worksheet. So we need to understand how the analysis happened, because even though it says it's raw data, you see that there have been some analysis done and some charts created. We need a differentiation between the two charts that are in the data worksheet, and also documentation of methodology that you saw in the metadata that it was empty. So without the methodology, I cannot understand what this data shows me, and I cannot understand how it can be useful for me. Also, we don't have the information, what are the different columns in the different sheets of the file. And here it also gets a bit complicated, because what, for example, I would propose would be very clear organization in columns of the data. So it's not confusing for someone who is reading the data set, that the part below is some new table. So I would put the table on the side instead of below. Okay, so this was about metadata, and you as managers do need to be able to understand the point of metadata, what your metadata are, and you need to be able to discuss with your team if they have, for example, fulfilled their obligation to have proper metadata for the project. So I will continue with data reuse. So, common issues with reused data. One thing, it's this, I don't see a license, I'll just use it. I say here, big no-no, but of course, yeah. I would say nowadays, with all the license that exists, it's very common that we see data with licenses. So try to use data that have a license, because if you use data that are not under a specific license, we consider them all rights reserved, copyrighted anyway. So you're not sure if you can use it. So this is one thing that you can take care of now, since the licenses exist and are commonly used nowadays. We mentioned before, all data together for one publication in a repository is not ideal, because it confuses. The DOI is related to a lot of different data sets. And for example, you might have spectroscopy, you might have microscopy, you might have X-ray data. And if all these three are in the same DOI, it's very difficult for people first to cite you properly because they will cite the general DOI, so they will not specify which data set they used. Second of all, if you do updates and version in one of the types of data sets, so for example, only for X-ray data, and you do versioning there, but the rest of the data remain the same, the persons who have been using your data might want to update their data to the new version, and they will need to do all the work from the beginning because they do not know exactly which part is updated and which is not. So for example, if you update the X-ray, but they have used the spectroscopy data, they might start analyzing again the spectroscopy because it's not clear that the versioning belongs only to the X-ray. And these are just some examples of the problems that can happen. Data and publication together, again, it's not clear which persistent identifier is connected to what. And if you have several data sets in one publication, it is not clear what the people are reading about, or for example, you might have the same spectroscopy, microscopy, X-ray, and in the same publication, and someone needs to analyze the data. They use the same DOI, and then something happens, for example, and you need to retract your publication or something, you might have a problem there, yeah? And data and software together are also problematic. What you need to understand is that the data and publications and all the data connected and the software need to be connected also through their persistent identifiers. They need to be understandable that this is working with this software. So to work with this data, you need my open source software, for example. This is great. This is how it should be connected. But if you put them together in one record and you use, for example, a license that is related to software, it's very possible that the data are not affected by this license. Because if the license is just talking about software, how can I have the same rules for use for the data? So you need to have separate records in order for the people to be able to understand what license and which DOI is connected to what. Yeah, this is the solutions that I was basically talking about right now. And you also should not forget that the metadata are also very commonly not the same. So, for example, for the example of software and data, the metadata are completely different, and the metadata of the software might contain information that to work with the software, you might need to use this data to get this result. So it is connected to the data you are sharing, but the production of the data might be completely different than the production of the software. So how to stay up to date as the manager and not get crazy with all this information I have just shared? You need to learn, again, a recap, you need to learn what data does my team produce. You need to be aware at least of the overview, and you need to make sure that the researchers understand that what they're working with is data, because data might be found in a book or it might be found in a laboratory. It's still data. So the people who are working in a team, they need to understand that the data they are working with is what they're working with. Data also come with the licenses we were talking about. So it would be good for you if you are aware at least of some common open licenses that exist. For example, Creative Commons that we were mentioning. There are others that are different for software. And it would be good to have an idea what licenses your data can use for publications and data publication, but also to be aware that the team is also clear on licensing, and that they don't just use any data set they find, but they can follow appropriate rules and find data sets that have an open license, for example, and are free to use and modified, for example. And then you also, as a manager, need to have a clear plan about what data you would need to submit in the end of the project or in the end of the month or the year. Like if you are planning to submit the raw data or the analyzed data or any other way curated data, this can differ from discipline or from funder or from the university itself. So you need to think about and make clear what data you are publishing in a repository, for example, or if you're storing some data in a cold storage, for example, the raw data. So they will not be uploaded in a repository, but they will still be somewhere available. Possible trainings you can actually arrange for your team is, for example, a mandatory 2-hour workshop for all the team on data management for the project. So you can hire a data steward, or you can ask the data steward of the institute or the project itself to do this workshop. And they can have then all the team members have a clear understanding of what the data management will be for the project, and they can ask questions, they can confirm or deny some theories they have about their data. So it's very useful if you're able to give this, especially in the beginning of the project, and preferably also in the middle of the project if we're talking about a long-term project. Then the second bullet point is data stewardship module 1. This is part of, this started from Doc and Hans in the University of Norway, and it is free to use. Here I have added the link from NTK, who also use this lesson. It says data stewardship. You don't need to be a data steward to take this module 1. It's for free. You basically will learn the basics of open science, and it's very short, like it's 15-minute videos and the maximum 10 videos, I think. So if you share just this link with your team, they can just go through and understand the basics of open science if they don't have the basics already. Then another thing that comes back to what I was talking about in the beginning about when we're doing data management planning in the project, I would advise that you do quite often, but not like every day. It's not possible anyway. But to have a specific timeline or time frame that you will be reviewing your data management plan, for example. In large projects of 3-4 years, for example, you can have a 3-month data check. This is just an example because you might have a project that is just 6 months, then you can change it accordingly. If you leave it, the data check for 6 months, for example, it might be already too late because in 6 months, a lot of data have been generated, renamed, analyzed usually also. So you might lose a lot of information that might be very valuable to you. Another advice would be individual short data management plans for larger groups. So for example, if you work with more than 50 people and they work in sub-teams, you can have short DMPs for them to keep updating. And then the data steward, for example, of the project can compile them into a big data management plan for the project, but it's easier for the teams to work with a small data management plan. And then, as mentioned, data steward, for example, a specialized person to deal with data management practices. So how can a data steward help for your project? Because usually in Czech Republic, we do have several institutional data stewards, but still the project data steward is not very common yet. And you might want to change your mind on that, and you might start hiring some people for that because they do very valuable work. They save time from you as the manager, and they help the team stay on the same point. How can they help? They can help by checking the data formats and the naming conventions, for example, of the team. And they stay focused on data so you can stay focused on other outputs. And they can create a research data management policy for the whole project. So this data management planning can be part of their work and they can be updating it with the team, but they can create the basic rules for the team in the beginning, so the team has a baseline to start working with. And they can also be available to answer possible questions about data management. And they play a very important role as an intermediate between you and the team and all the also other stakeholders that are interested in your data, because they get the information from the researchers who are producing and analyzing the data, and they can transform it into an easy way to explain it to a stakeholder, for example, who is not in the laboratory. And now we will talk about help for institutes. There is more information even than what I'm going to give, but I tried to do a summary that I find useful. Help at institutes and the data stewards map. This is some initiative I really love. It's in the EOSC-CZ website. You can right now use the QR code and find the web page. You can see here a map. And for example, here is my name, and you can see how you can find the data steward. I will actually show you how it works. So if you click on the link later that is in the presentation, you will end up in EOSC-CZ webpage. It's in English and Czech. And here you can find the community of data stewards if you're a data steward, or even if you're looking for one and want to do a job posting. Beginner's guide for data stewards, and also this is great, this ethical guidelines for working with research data. It's in Czech only right now, but in a few days it will be also in English, and you can also put yourself on the map. And what we see here is a interactive map of Czech Republic. You can see number of data stewards in specific areas, and here I will write name of a university, and it shows me the options. And if I click on it, it shows me all the people that are working in the specific university. For example, the first person here, it shows us email, a picture, and also the map shows us how many data stewards there are in the university, and also where exactly it is in the map. I can also write my name. If you look for a specific data steward, you can find where I work, my email, my work email, and how many years I have been a data steward, for example, and where to find me. So this is a great interactive map. You can also click on the bottom here and you will find the affiliation of the people. If I remove my name, you can see all the data stewards with, for example, their information. So this is a way that you can find data steward that can help you for your group, and you can ask for, sorry, just a second. Yeah, you can ask for help, and they will probably be able to answer your questions, because also different disciplines have different questions. Not everyone is specializing in everything, and we cannot have all the answers all the time. But the good thing about the data stewards community in Czech Republic is that we are very close and we talk with each other. So we, if we are not sure about an answer, we usually discuss between us, of course, if it is allowed to discuss it, and try to find the best answer for everyone. So it's really helpful for you to take advantage of this initiative. And even if the person you find there for some reason, I don't know, they are in some leave or some, for example, you can try another data steward and ask them if they can propose to you someone in your institute. We really are connected to each other, so we can help on that. And uh, from EOSCZ, you don't only find the data stewards map, but also several trainings like today's seminar. Or, for example, there was the Open Science Week, and another seminar that happened a few weeks ago was field-specific repositories for STEM. And you can find the link already in the website of EOSC, and you can go through the seminar. And for example, several seminars happen in English, in Czech, or depending. So you can really find a lot of information that is important for you as managers, but also for your teams. There will be some information in the end about upcoming trainings, so pay attention by the end. Another initiative that I really like is the National Library of Technology that has here this calendar that you can find their own trainings. And also they have here, for example, I put it here, this link, they have the skill set map for mentors of early career researchers, which is exactly what managers should pay attention to. It's not just for people who are planning to have their own laboratory team, for example, but in general for mentoring. And when you are managing a team, you are kind of mentoring the team. So I would say it's worth the read. Oh, sorry. Another page I added for you for your own convenience is few links from different funders and the requirements or recommendations about open science. There are more. I added four that I consider major ones, and there are many more that you can find. I gave this just as an example, so you can go through and read what they are proposing, for example, or what they are requiring if you haven't done it already. You will find that a lot of the requirements are very similar most of the time. So if you understand the concept of open science and data management once, usually you need to just review the new funder documents because the rules stay very similar, but very few things might change. So it's good for you to always read the new versions of open science policies or requirements, recommendations that each funder is uploading with the within the time of your project. Another beautiful initiative that I really love is the Breakfast with Data Stewards. It started at the VŠHT in Prague, and basically we have been now collaborating in a more national environment. So not only VŠHT, but last time it was collaboration between VŠHT, ČVUT, and National Technical Library. And basically, the breakfast with data stewards is open for everyone. There is some coffee. And basically, you come there with your questions. We choose a topic only. We don't have a presentation, so it's not a seminar. It is a conversation between data stewards and people who need help and have questions and they don't know where to go and ask. This happens like 3 times per year approximately, and we are also open to proposals. You can follow the updates on news for new breakfasts in the LinkedIn that I have had it here. And lastly, I will say not to forget, I will not go through it because we have already been talking quite some time. So I would say that some things you need to consider is the use, the conversation with a lawyer, an ethical committee if you're working with sensitive data, for example. Also to be mindful of the use of AI. It's great that there is now this burst of information. So if you, for example, upload your data in a specific application, it might use your data for their own training for the application. So just be mindful when you're using AI to understand what exactly you are agreeing to. Also for international collaborations, do not forget to double check with legal departments of all countries that are connected what is the expectations of open science, of data management, on authorship. So just a few reminders for the end. And that was it from me. now we can go to Q&A. And I would say that here in the QR codes, if you want, you can mention other things you want to dive deeper into, and we can consider them and give another training based on your recommendation. So feel free to write there. So if you don't have any other question, I will, as I said, share this presentation. It's under CC BY 4 International, so you're free also to share it with your team if you need. You're free to write to me if you need any clarification. And as I said, in the last QR code, you can enter and write possible trainings that you will be interested to follow. Thank you very much. From my side, that is all.
Georgia, thank you very much for a very interesting webinar. Now, I would like to invite you for our next event. We will organize the National EOS conference from the 2nd to the 3rd of December in Ostrava. And you can also join us online. We find all information about our events on our website. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us and have a nice day. Bye.